So how was the week?
Well, I think as they tend to do, it disappeared in a flash, and I guess we have to take that as a good sign. I know some people might think differently, but yeah, I think it's been great. I mean, for certainly for UK column, you know, I think at the end of the last episode of this, I was talking about, you know, looking forward to this week and the stuff that we might talk about, and I think for us the news cycle in a way is as bizarre as always, but I think the format that we have and the ability to talk about it in at greater length is fantastic. I think personally and professionally, it helps to be able to talk afterwards in a less formal, less time constrained capacity. I think that does actually make a difference. I think it's easy to get so caught up in something that you're reporting on that by the time you do it's in a sort of different part of your brain, and so to have that slightly slower time period afterwards is great. And I think with that fits well within your new show. And again, adding a different dimension of what's required of brain capacity to follow what people are saying and introducing completely new topics. I think it's fantastic. So, yeah, for me, been a very good week.
And I'm just continuing to be staggered about how much we aren't able to put in the news because there's so much going on at the moment that there just isn't time, and it is incredible. I mean, we are well on the way to. I think, have we announced what we're doing with the news program? But anyway, I might as well just mention it. We're on our way to going back to 5 days a week. We haven't done this for many, many years because, there's no other way to cover the range of topics that we need to cover. And, we're regularly getting emails. Why didn't you talk about this? Why didn't you talk about that? It's impossible with the time constraints that we have. So we need to make more time for ourselves.
But Charles, you said a moment ago that the news cycle seems so bizarre. Here's a thought that I had the other day. Is it actually bizarre, or are we just more aware of what's going on, or has it genuinely become more bizarre? I'm not sure.
I can answer that if you want. It's genuinely become more bizarre. Right, and there's a number of reasons for this. Part of it is real, and part of it is fake. It has become more bizarre because it's absolutely clear that on the establishment side, the people that are supposed to know what they're doing, they're supposed to be able to run countries, they're supposed to be able to run international relations and so on. They are off their heads, and so they're behaving in a particularly paranoid in many ways, but just aggressive and quite unpleasant ways. To each other, to the general population, and so on, because they're off their heads. That feeds through to everybody else. But as well as that, there is no doubt that we are in a massive information war at the moment, and a big component of that is the deliberate pollution of the information space with rubbish. And just any kind of rubbish to with a view to. I mean, they started using the term post-truth world a number of years ago, but the aim of the game here is because the term post-truth world came about around the same time that they started using the word trust in a particular way, and the aim of the game here is to so pollute the information space. Their intention, whether they're successful in this or not, we can talk about, but their intention is to try to push people to one location for trustworthy information, and the internet and social media is not it, right? So the aim is to so discredit everything that's on social media that really you have to go to the BBC or the Guardian for your information. And this is happening through the increased use of AI and algorithms to generate this content at a pace that nobody else can compete with, and it's also through psychological operations, actors like 77 Brigade and other various groupings of this type that are out there just pushing out the biggest pile of dung onto the internet that they can possibly do.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly not going to disagree with any of that. I think I think what's one of the changes, it's not a new one, but I think that the effect is felt on a continuing basis and will be so, is that because everybody has been drawn in, exactly like Mike says, this extraordinary space, whether it's the internet or social media, or however exactly you term it. But the point is that the weighting of content across that medium is not like it was before. The ability of somebody to have something bizarre or stupid or wrong or questionable, whatever, for that to be magnified or multiplied in a way that never would have happened previously is quite commonplace now. And I think what has happened ever since I suppose they felt that it was inevitable and they had to, but when the mainstream publications started to, first of all, quote people from social media and then started to use it themselves, that was, I think, the beginning of the end, because for several reasons. I mean, one was that they were forgetting, or appeared to willfully forget, that Twitter, let's say, was a platform that belonged to somebody else. It wasn't this sort of transparent space with no prejudice, and I think they right from the start they absolutely gave a wrongful impression of what these platforms were. And look where we are now with the censorship regime, with the powers in the UK that Ofcom has to prevail upon these platforms to chuck people like UK Column off their space. I mean, it's so where we've got to with it is perfectly extraordinary. But also then they started putting out their messaging on it, and then lo and behold, the government follows suit. And I mean, the whole thing is it's the gutter, really, and a lot of these people and organisations really should not belong there. And in fact, just to exemplify that, I was just bringing up an image. I might report on this next week. I saw a tweet yesterday, I think it was. I mean, the sensationalism is just childish and extraordinary. But this is from the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and there's a sort of graphic. Everything's about pictures these days. So there's a sort of picture of a graph that's quite clearly just been drawn on the back of a fag packet. But it says at the top, we're running out of prison places. And then at the bottom, this is from the government. It says, without action, there will be a total breakdown. And total breakdown is sort of highlighted in a block. A total breakdown of law and order. And this is from the government. This is not some sort of, opposition electioneering poster. They are putting this stuff out. And it's just crazy. It's crazy talk. What on earth do they mean by that? They are in control, but they aren't at the same time. And no one else can save you or quite what. I mean, to divine some kind of message from this is almost impossible. And I think this is part of it. People are so incredibly confused, exactly like Mike says, on both sides. I mean, the people that are putting the messages out don't even understand really what it is they're saying. But I think a part of that is because of the factors I describe, and that people have moved into spaces they never should have done. They haven't really considered that. And the other thing, I think, is that this relentless sense of the necessity for immediacy, it just drives an agenda of utter pointlessness. These, particularly from the government, they have these Twitter accounts, so therefore they've got to put stuff out in there. I mean, you look at the things that get put on there. I mean, why are they there? They do it because that's how the system works. If you don't put content on there, people don't follow you, people don't share your stuff, whatever. I mean, why does the Home Office need followers, for example? I mean, it's the Home Office. It's not just going to not exist if people don't look at its Twitter page. I mean, in a way, sadly, but yeah, it is very, very strange.
One of you mentioned post-truth, and something that I was thinking about recently is exactly that. It's always the other person, though, who doesn't know the truth.
how do you discern what is true and what isn't true? Well, the first thing is you've got to. I mean, I'm not accusing anybody here, but we have to stop being lazy. We have to stop. There's a very much an approach that many, if not most people, take, that if somebody who they view as being a trusted voice says something, that therefore it's true. And that's not necessarily the case. That applies to me. The last thing, or anybody, the last thing I want is for anybody to take anything I say as being gospel or the truth. That's not the point. I'm putting out information which I believe to be correct. Otherwise, I wouldn't put it out. But that doesn't make me above criticism, and it certainly doesn't mean that I'm a credible source that should just be without criticism accepted. Everything needs to be checked, and it needs to be checked with primary sources, not with I don't care what platform you trust. In inverted commas, that is a secondary source. So I mean, just to give an example, many occasions I'll see something on the BBC or in mainstream media which talks about a report said, and often, and of course they never link to the report, and it actually takes a lot of effort to get to the source. And when you get to the source, you find that the source didn't say that at all. They've spun the story in some way. So the key thing is to drop the laziness and actually put the effort into trying to work out for yourself what the truth is, and that means going to as close to the source of the information as you possibly can get. And then you can start to analyze and make a decision for yourself about what the truth is. I mean, assuming there is an objective truth, and I believe there is an objective truth, because ultimately, something has happened, and something is correct. The trick is to try to identify what that correct thing is, and the only way to do that is to put the effort in. And most people don't do that. Most people simply share the sensationalist material that they find on social media without any discernment or actually working out whether it should be shared or not. And that in fact, every time somebody does that, anytime somebody looks at a post on social media uncritically and just shares it, they are doing the other side's job, because because the other side, the establishment wants rubbish shared on the internet, because that gives them the justification for everything else that they do in terms of the censorship regime. And so, it is, in my opinion, beholden on us all to actually not just with, as a knee-jerk reaction, share the latest sensationalist post. You've got to put the effort in, work out, is it correct? And if it's correct, absolutely share it as hard as you can, but only once you're happy that it's for certain correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like Mike's saying, I mean, the issue is, insofar as truth is concerned, is there one objective truth? And without wanting to sort of dodge or complicate the issue, it does depend. It depends on, if you're the example you use, where, say, the BBC will cite, refer to a report, which also, by the way, one should add, is usually a report that's come out well over 6 months ago and hasn't been addressed at all, but probably will have been dealt with by UK Column. It's something like that. You can go to the report and you can see for sure that what has been reported by the third party is just not correct. So there you can find an objective truth there. I think in a lot of other situations it's a little bit more nebulous than that, perhaps, and that does put us into slightly difficult waters. But then it becomes a matter of belief, and your beliefs are underpinned by very thorough research and an appraisal of all the factors that you can put before yourself. And so we're in a sort of dodgy area, because this does sound a little bit like post-truth and this, that, and the other. But then the absolutes are really rare, and I think we do. I mean, going back to what you were saying, talking about facts in the COVID era. I mean, how utterly laughable that it should be the scientific community that would declare there to be absolutes. I mean, it's as though the whole meaning of science has been completely forgotten. I mean, no great coincidence that also was a time of enormous investment, let's say, in science. But that's slightly by the by. I mean, again, etymologically and from an argument point of view, the way we use the word fact now is incorrect. I mean, a fact was never an absolute truth. A fact was, I mean, the derivation of the word is to make something. So it's to make a position, it's to make a statement. It's not incontrovertible. And yet that's how they're used now. So when we talk about scientists putting out facts or the government's putting out facts, well, actually what they're meaning is it's something they have made, it's a position they have made, which is absolutely open to challenge. But of course we sit there and think, oh, right, well, in which case that must be that. I mean, maybe we don't. I hope we don't. But people do. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. But yeah, I mean, on the belief side of it, that will at times come down to a question of perspective. And just to take this down to, you know, in a sense, relate it back to your anecdote about your grandmother. As people might know, some of my professional experience was spent policing, and one of the things I always found fascinating was to investigate something where you were lucky enough to have several different sources of evidence, in that if it were an incident that had taken place, a physical incident that had involved other people, and you could take witness statements from people that did have a particular point of view, as in a literal point of view, they were nearby what happened, and maybe all of that was also filmed on CCTV, or maybe CCTV from two different places. What was completely remarkable, and in a way you can't quite believe it till you do see it, but you might get 3 witness statements that would appear to be talking about almost totally separate incidents, and then CCTV footage that would show something else again. So my point is that depending on where you're standing, you will in fact see a different version of an event. Okay, I know I'm sort of superimposing a literal analogy onto this, but the point is that there is nuance, there is complexity to all of this, for those instances that are outside of the, well, this report says that, and you can go to the report and it quite clearly doesn't actually say that. But that's, you know, unfortunately, that is not the way that everything works. And so ultimately we do have to, it's a sort of best effort, and it has to be a belief to be able to go that step further and say that your belief is the truth. I would say in a lot of instances is a step too far, but that, you know, that works both ways, and people have to acknowledge that.
Let's use a real world example of what you're talking about. The South African president went to the White House and met with Donald Trump, and the whole thing to some degree was theatrical. What is true about what was said there?
So you've got to make a judgment. First of all, you've got to see the comments from Donald Trump in context. But before we even get to that point, you've got to ask, first of all, what is the definition of genocide? And so what definition are you going to use for the use of the term? Now, in this case, it's extremely difficult because South Africa does not publish statistics on ethnicity of people that are murder victims. So the last statistics I saw were for the last 3 months of last year. And there may be more recent ones, but those let's just take those as an example because that's what I have in my head. And there was something in the region of 6,000 murders in South Africa in the last 3 months of last year. And the official numbers say that one of those was a white farmer, that there were several others that were farm workers or people that were living on the farms. Now, of course, somebody that is on the pro. I don't mean pro in the sense that they support it, but they believe in the idea of a white genocide in South Africa will say, oh, well, those are official statistics, so you can't believe those anyway. Well, that's true, but they're the only statistics that we have at this point. But on the other hand, the other statistic that I thought was interesting, that Donald Trump made this offer, and so far, what have there been? About 40 or 50 people have taken it up. So that does not imply a white genocide, because there's not a mass exodus. Now, what I think we can say is that since the ANC has come to power, they have certainly allowed, for whatever reason, they have allowed significant lawlessness, and you know, that figure of 6,000 murders in 3 months is you know, incredible, and I don't know how any country can stand for that. But my understanding of it is that without doubt there is unfairness in the legal system, in the sense that whenever these, because what we're looking at here is criminality, it's gangs that are going around, and of course, if they view a white farmer or white farms as being relatively affluent, then of course they're going to be targets of criminality. But the criminality is not genocide, so that's a point to make. But the point is, if these criminal gangs are running around the countryside, murdering each other, and as a side effect of the theft that which is really what's motivating them, people are being injured and killed. And then the law enforcement is not, doing anything about that. Then it's clear that is an unfair situation for the victims of that criminality. But again, that's not genocide either. It's a bad situation, and it should be dealt with. And really, Ramaphosa should be doing something about it. But clearly, he isn't. But then on top of that, you've got the question of whether or not there is intent from the government to effectively take land without compensation or from anybody, whether it's white farmers or any, and I don't know actually what the truth of that is, and maybe you can help with that, but I've seen a video clip of Ramaphosa talking about this, but I don't know what the context of it is, and I don't know, how accurate or truthful it is to perceive it this way. So it's very difficult to get to the bottom of exactly what's going on, and of course, people that are on the receiving end of criminality are going to be very vocal about it. But it all, for me, it all comes down to what's your definition of genocide, and then. Sorry, I'll just make one final point. And then we've got to, as I say, see it in the context of other events, and the fact that South Africa is itself making allegations of genocide against a certain other country, and that Trump is a supporter of that other country precisely, and therefore is he jumping on this particular bandwagon, which nobody has said anything about for the last goodness knows how many years. Suddenly it's become an issue. Why has it suddenly become an issue now? And so you can sort of come to a conclusion about what's actually going on there without, I think that conclusion is possible to come to without getting caught up in particular ideologies or narratives.
In South Africa,
I think, but there's another important point there. What's going on in Gaza is state violence. This is the state using state weaponry, state war capability to bomb the hell out of a part of a country. Right in South Africa, the violence, whatever it is not state violence, or at least I haven't seen any evidence whatsoever that the state is in any way directly involved in it. They're certainly not using the military. They're not bombing farms with F-35s. So it's not state violence, and that is another significant difference here.
And you're correct. And so I said this earlier this week that the definition of genocide it's an infinite loop. Because what it does is that it captures you into a particular set of parameters, and you can't get out of it. So you're no longer arguing about what's going on. You're arguing about what a word means. And so you go around and around and around and around, and it's a distraction ultimately.
Yeah. No. I mean, the minefield where statistics are concerned is boundless. You know, you think I don't mean to compare this with what's just been said about Gaza. But if you think, and your question at the beginning was, you know, we started talking about South Africa. You're in South Africa, so you know, you must know because you're there.
No, but it's a big country.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what's so fascinating. And you think back to what was happening, you know, and I can speak for the UK in 2020. If you had lived in Austria and you'd called your English or Welsh or Scots, Northern Irish friend and said, gosh, you know, what's with this pandemic thing? You know, is it real? And obviously 95% of people answering that telephone call would have said, oh yeah, gosh, it's absolutely real. You know, people dropping like flies. I mean, look at these graphs, you know, look at the statistics. It's across the board, it's across the regions. And of course, that's not my belief at all. I don't think any of that happened. I think that it's perfectly possible to kill people by imposing conditions on them that mean their lives basically stop being lived as they would like, and therefore they will die. I mean, that's no great surprise. You don't need anyone to be ill, or even the, you know, you just need the sort of the spectre of illness. But so the two things. One is how statistics. I mean, we know this. It's obvious, but how statistics are wielded and manipulated to whatever end. But of course, the other thing is this idea of sort of ground truth. Oh well, you know, and again, you think of the BBC. Here's so-and-so reporting from Lahore, and usually if they're reporting from Lahore, it'll be about something that's happening in Delhi or something, you know, I mean, it's just, so the idea that somebody that is there, A, can actually see what's going on, but B, has any better idea than anyone who isn't there. And I think it's very easy to sort of just use that idea of proximity as being meaningful when it's still, like, exactly like Mike says. I mean, there's still so much more scrutiny of the information that should be conducted. It doesn't matter really where anyone is. And then on the South African thing, I mean, I'm afraid that for me it's the Musk influence that I think is impossible to ignore, in that he is desperate to flout the law with the black and white ownership thing and the deal, the Starlink and Tesla deal that he's been trying to sort out with Ramaphosa. I'm sure that must have something to do with the
well, definitely. I think it's part of Agenda 2030. Thing. I think it's part of Agenda 2030. Yeah. It's to bring more mass surveillance into the agricultural sector. Yeah. I mean, Catherine Fitz has spoken about this.
It's a bit like going back to the BBC says such and such a report says something. In actual fact, whilst, I mean, let's say, you know, climate change, the whole sort of, 97% of climate change scientists say this, that, and the other. So yes, it would be perfectly possible to read a report and come away with perhaps more than one conclusion, depending on your point of view before you started reading it. And I think that's that's the Douglas Murray thing. It doesn't matter where you take Douglas Murray, he's not going to stop being a Zionist. And so it's in a way that's immaterial. However, there absolutely, of course, there is. I mean, I would say there is absolutely a value in going to the source, whether that be a physical place or whatever. But exactly like you say, that doesn't qualify you to have an opinion that cannot be challenged.
Just as a matter of interest, I don't know if I told you, I was at a dinner last year with Douglas Murray and a bunch of other people. He came to South Africa. I was actually invited. I'm not exactly friends with him. And there were maybe, I don't know, 60 people at the dinner. And he said that Israel must not stop bombing Gaza. And everybody took their glasses of wine and chinked and cheered and clapped. And I just watched this and I thought, this is incredible.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, forgive me. Am I not correct in thinking that you impersonate his voice fairly accurately?
No, I can't impersonate his voice. I can't even sound British. What are you talking about?
I thought you did quite a good Douglas Murray. I thought I heard you say it the other way. Oh, well, okay, fair enough.
It wasn't
something to work on for next week.
Listen to my accent. I can't even come anywhere close to your accent.
Well, that might be a good thing. Yeah, I mean, but that's it. That is exactly it, and it's it's perfectly astonishing. We were talking in Extra on Wednesday's news this week, following a report that Sandy Adams had done about the Delphi technique and about manufacturing consent. And this is it. It is absolutely amazing. She showed a sort of cartoon of a bunch of people all verbally agreeing with something, and the little thought bubble from everybody's heads was, no, that I can't remember what the exact words were, but no, this sounds like a terrible idea. I don't think so. And yet everybody said yes, and it just constantly astonishes me. I mean, I know it shouldn't, because that sort of sounds as though it's terrifically naive, especially after all this time. But at any level, really, of society where these sorts of ideas get floated or pushed out, there has to be a start point for that. There has to be an initial meeting where somebody says, so, bombing civilians, what do we think? And, why do people lack the integrity and the moral courage to just say straight away, no, we're not doing that?
Because you've just hit the nail on the head as to why we're in this mess in the first place, and why I get personally so frustrated with anybody who says, but what can I do? Right? What we need to do, what each of us needs to do, is to start with ourselves. We need to develop the moral courage and the moral backbone to stand up and say, no, this is not going to happen in my name, or whatever. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about genocide in Gaza or a low traffic zone in a local authority. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If you disagree with it, you've got to have the guts to stand up and say, even in the face of, you being the only voice in a room of 100 people, it doesn't matter. We've got to. Each of us has got to start right there, because without that, everybody just goes along, and I can't remember when the conversation was. Was it last week when you were talking about the suggestion that people will go to the camps without to the gulags. This is why it's important that we have to work on ourselves first before we even start looking at what's going on the outside. It's what's inside that is the key, and that's why I'm seeing inaction from most people. Even people that are very strongly disagreeing with everything that's going on around them, they sit there and say, well, what can I do? I'm not going to write to my MP. I'm not going to, they won't take a single step, because there's always an excuse for not taking that step. And that's got to change. Everybody's got to be speaking out in some way. It doesn't matter what way it is or how people choose to express themselves. Find the most creative way to express yourself you possibly can, but you got to have the fiber to do it, and that starts with us.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
I was thinking. Yeah, sorry, go on, Charles.
No. That was it. No, go on.
No, I was going to say that this whole thing about finding truth it's a forever war, isn't it? It's not something that will end anytime soon. It's not like we're going to wake up one morning and go, right, today we know the truth. It has arrived and we can now see it. I mean, I think this is part of the existential crisis of humanity. It goes, I think, even way back to the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, and even further, trying to figure out what was true about what was happening around them.
But I don't see that as a crisis. That's not a crisis. That's what life's about. That's fun. That's working out how life works.
True. Yeah,
we should be looking at that as being something that gives us enjoyment.
Right.
Okay. Right.
Yes. That's a good point.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. But I mean, what you're saying is actually correct. So it's not an existential crisis. There are very few, I suppose, existential crises, and they don't really have to do have anything to do with truth. They probably have to do with things like volcanoes and the sun exploding and things like that.
No, I think you're onto something there. I think the existential crisis is the fact that people are actually not interested in discovery, and I think that is the problem. They're not interested in engagement with life in any. They want to go and get drunk at the weekend. whatever, because actually they just want to escape from
This is
what's going
true.
on around them, and
Yeah,
that's the existential crisis, in my opinion.
like in the last few years, this idea, for example, of being vaccinated has become cult-like in its status. For the longest time in my life, I can never remember a stage when asking if somebody was vaccinated or unvaccinated elicited such an emotive response.
I think this started well before that, Jerm. If we look at Brexit, for example, and there's other things before that again. This has been a process that's been developing for a very long time, and people have had division imposed upon them. But this comes back to this whole conversation about. This whole conversation explains why that has happened, because people have not been actually engaged properly with what's going on around them. They have then allowed themselves to be driven into one camp or the other. There's the camp that wore masks, the camp that didn't wear masks. There's the camp that voted Brexit, the camp that didn't vote Brexit. There's the camp that protested the potential to go to a war in Iraq in 2003, and the camp that didn't. And that this division has been, I haven't seen a division that's. Each time that they do this, it gets harder and harder, a divide. And actually, the Israel-Gaza thing has become probably one of the hardest divides that I've seen ever. So we have been being softened up. Yes, COVID was a very big one, and that one of the real softening exercises, no doubt about it, right up there at the top of the list. But it's been going on for decades. Somebody said to me when October the 7th happened, somebody said to me, why are you supporting the Palestinians? Greta's supporting the Palestinians, right? And the implication was that because somebody else that I disagree with on another topic was supporting this topic that I happen to support, that therefore I'm wrong. Well, I'm sorry, that doesn't make me wrong. It doesn't make me wrong that somebody who was taking the knee for George Floyd is wearing a Palestinian scarf around their neck. It doesn't mean that Israel bombing Palestine is the thing that I need to be supporting. And this is the problem. We are allowing ourselves to be driven into camps. One of the things that I'm probably proudest of with respect to the UK column is that we'll get equal criticism for being left wing and right wing. Nobody knows what the hell we are, and this is the point, because I'm looking at things in terms of what I think is the right thing, what I think the truth is, and as I said before, that doesn't mean that it's objectively true, but certainly I'm doing my best to try to get as far. We all are trying to get to what is objectively true, but I'm not gonna make my judgment on what true is based on whether I consider myself to be conservative this week or whether I consider myself to be a socialist next week. That's not how it works. You got to take each issue on its merits.
The main thing is that most people now would not know a principle if it ran up to them in the street, pulled their trousers down and punched them in the face. They just they don't get it. And so how do we live in a world where for 2 years solid, we were told that we were saving lives. We had to do everything we could to save lives. And then the moment the illegal Russian aggression started in February 2022, we had to then quickly kill as many people as possible. And then when in October 2023, some Israelis were killed, which was reported as being a terrible tragedy, we then had to make sure that a lot of Palestinians were killed to make up for it. It's absolutely absurd, and it comes down to very, very straightforward principles. And if you follow principles, you really don't go far wrong. But of course, people have utterly lost sight of that, which is why it is so easy to manipulate division. Because people just totally forget what it's about, and you do get, and then you will get, oh gosh, no, well I can't support that this week because Greta's already got there first, and I don't agree with her. Well, because actually, funnily enough, that was even on the news. There was that she was she was in Tbilisi. She was. Do you remember there was that rather awkward video of her dancing in the streets in Georgia? And I think I made a throwaway comment. I said I felt rather sorry for her because she did look a little bit pitiful. She was just sort of dancing, not terribly convincingly, on the street in Georgia, and it was all a bit awkward. And, at a very human level, of course I felt sorry for her. I feel sorry for her for a whole host of reasons. She should not have been put in that terrible position of just a lifetime of absurd pressure that she frankly sort of had no part in, didn't really understand. So of course I feel sorry for her. But then the next thing is there are sort of comments about, well, how can you sympathise with Greta or this, that and the other? And, okay, it's the principle. It's not. I'm not saying now suddenly. Oh well, therefore I have to fall in line with absolutely everything she's ever said. It's not how it works. Anyway, it should be very simple.
Your point about principles and values is for me foundational. So that's why I make a very clear-cut argument, and I think that people need to have something to believe in. Now, this is going to sound a bit woo-woo, but I have come to realize that, for example, believing in nothing is a great way to be manipulated and influenced. So I don't care if you're a Muslim or if you're a Christian, but at least you have a set of values. I don't have to necessarily agree with your values, but at least you have a set of values on which to base your decision making.
I think you've hit something quite important there, because that is something that I've had sent in my direction. I don't know whether Charles said this in the last number of months, once or twice. Why did you talk about this in this way? Because you're beginning to sound like the BBC. What that sentiment represents is the idea that if it's on the BBC, then it has to be, you have to take the opposite position. So the BBC can never be right about anything. This is very dangerous, because of course it's not, life is not black and white, and we've sort of touched on this already, but life is not black and white in this way. And there is nuance, there's shades of grey, and sometimes the BBC covers things. The facts, as they say, speak for themselves, and the BBC has no choice but to explain things as they are in some cases. If we simply allow ourselves to say that there is no truth ever in anything that comes out of a mainstream mouth, whether it be a politician or the BBC or whatever it happens to be, then we, without question, end up going down blind alleys and being taken in directions that are not productive. And in fact, bearing in mind the complexity of the information space at the moment, I would argue in many cases are there specifically to draw people into blind alleys and directions which are unproductive. So,
can I give you what I believe is a good way to navigate the minefield of propaganda and information? I asked at the beginning of this discussion, how do you discern? I don't have the solution or any type of formula, but I do have a good rule of thumb, which I picked up from Nassim Taleb, who, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's written some great books on risk analysis. He got the COVID thing very wrong, and I'm well aware of that. And he even blocked me on Twitter at the time. But nonetheless, he's written a lot of very good stuff. And what he said in a nutshell is the following. Consider those making the claims and see if they have skin in the game. How much do they have to lose by making that statement? If CNN makes a statement and it's clearly wrong, what happens to CNN? Well, pretty much nothing. They just say, oh, sorry, we got that wrong, or they just don't do anything and they carry on. If somebody small, like let's say UK column in comparison, gets it wrong, there's a lot more to lose. You'll start having subscribers going, well, you know what, you guys are not trustworthy, we're going somewhere else. You have more skin in the game than, say, CNN or the BBC.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I would also just going back to what you were saying about, say, oh, well, Donald Trump might say this, which seems to be the case, or seems to be something that you might agree with, or whatever. And it's the same sort of thing. It's and indeed, insofar as the BBC, of course, will put out content that we may agree with on a factual basis. I think what you're talking about really is it concerns motivation. Why is something being said, and to what end? And I think particularly with any politician, to what end would they be saying such and such a thing? Similarly with a mainstream media organisation that, as you say, faces no backlash for anything that it really says, why would it be putting particular information into the public domain? And by the same token, why would it be not putting certain pieces of information out there? Why would things not be talked about? And actually, on that note, insofar as treating things on their own merits, on Wednesday's news, Mike played a clip from Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, leader of the Conservative Party at the moment. So she's in a position where, like leaders of the opposition tend to do, they can just say stuff without consequence because they know that they're miles away from a general election and they probably won't win that anyway. And so it doesn't really matter. It's just it is sort of theatre upon theatre. And yet, in an interview with Trevor Phillips, she said that Israel is fighting a proxy war on behalf of the UK, just as Ukraine is fighting a proxy war on behalf of Western Europe. She said that in a mainstream live television interview, and then silence. I mean, actually, I haven't seen what happened afterwards. I don't know what Trevor Phillips said to that, if anything.
Oh no, he didn't. He let it pass because really? I chopped the rest off. There was nothing of consequence in the next minute of comment. So yeah.
So she said that. I mean, it was during sort of quite an animated back and forth. So one feels that she wasn't completely in control when she said it, and therefore taking it at face value, it doesn't look like it was on her list of talking points to get out during the interview. It's as though it did sort of come out by accident. And so, therefore, in the skin in the game thing, you think, well, actually, was she seeking to make political points or capital from it? Maybe not. Maybe it was, as far as she's concerned, sort of an objective belief. But it's significant. And yet, it was met, like Mike says, met with silence, and we don't think it's been reported on elsewhere. So yes, I mean, this stuff, it does come out sometimes. Sometimes perhaps there isn't necessarily an agenda in saying it. It didn't look, in the way that she did say it, didn't look like she had a particular agenda in saying it, other than it was her belief.
I remember back in 2020, I was trying to find information to counter what I was seeing in the mainstream, and that's how I discovered UK Column. And my anecdotal story is that I had more faith in what was being published on UK Column about this quote-unquote pandemic than what CNN and BBC were publishing. And that's because, as I said, the small crew behind UK Column have got more skin in the game.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we do, and we the criticism comes directly to us as well. There aren't 500 layers between us and the public, because it's not often that if you want to criticize a specific reporter or presenter on the BBC, you don't get to do that directly. You got to go through Capita or whoever's running the BBC call center. So the criticism comes directly to us, and we don't get the opportunity to respond to every email or every comment that comes in our direction, but it's by and large, it's all read and it's all considered. So there were a couple of comments for me from yesterday's coverage of Wednesday's coverage of King Charles in Canada, and people suggesting that the allegations of abuse in the church-run schools for Indigenous children were over-egged and not quite accurate. Well, that message has been received and will be taken into account. I'm not sure. I think there is plenty of evidence to suggest the abuse that I was talking about. But that obviously will that feedback will be considered, and if there's a correction needs to be made, it'll be made. But that's still a bit of work to be done there. The point is that the feedback comes directly to us, and so it's not just the fact that there's financial skin in the game, which there is in terms of memberships and support that way, but also the direct contact that we have from our viewership.
Well, let's come in for landing. Final thoughts.
After you, Charles.
I think the
ladies
theme. Very kind. Okay. Yes, I think as a theme goes, or not a theme, like a sort of a talking point. I do think principles. The really elemental aspect of dealing things on their own merits. So exactly like we've been talking about, why would you make a rod for your own back and disagree with an organisation or a person based on who they are? I mean, that sounds like an extraordinary prejudice to carry around to, I would say, no effect or only a negative effect. So taking everything on its own merits is a much more straightforward way to approach things, and I think in the pursuit of an objective truth, if such a thing exists, that's the way to go about it. And again, in terms of forming your own points of view, which are totally critical, to follow principles and values. I mean, again, this is really interesting because something I've been pursuing for the last few weeks started with a story that the Ministry of Defence tried to get a grip of, which was a Royal Marine who put out a survey about the policy for diversity in the Royal Marines and how it would affect the combat effectiveness and this sort of thing. I mean, I would say, totally legitimate concern with the way in which things have been going. Anyway, the Ministry of Defence took the survey offline and then said that this was an issue of values and standards, and all regiments, units in the armed forces have their own set of values and standards. And the idea was that there was conflict between the Royal Marines' values and standards and this action. But that really wasn't the case. They're written down in black and white, and nothing this chap had done was in any way a challenge to the values and standards of the Royal Marines. In actual fact, it was absolutely based on him wanting to uphold that. In fact, for the commandos, it's slightly different. They have the commando ethos, I think it is, and something else. I apologise to all the bootnecks who will be shouting at the screen saying that I've got that wrong. But whatever it is, the Royal Marines have something slightly different written down. It's more simple. There's four key parts. But this, this was just spin by the Ministry of Defence, and that's where they get in trouble. I mean, I think that's the flip side of this. If you're not principled and you don't treat things on their own merits, you create a world of trouble for yourself. And this is where we go back to the beginning with the news cycle being so crazy and people just being nutcases sending out things that just don't make any sense. And I think this explains, in large part, if one's to assume that anyone is attempting sincerity in the first place, this is why people get it wrong, because they don't stick to the very, very fundamental and foundational point. And everybody veers off course. And that works both ways, not just those that are putting out the information, but those that are receiving it as well, which is why we get idiots like Douglas Murray standing up saying, let's bomb Israel. And everyone goes, oh, yeah, go on then. Daft.
Yeah, I would just say that, we were talking about resistance starting with us internally and sorting ourselves out. I think something that we have, a skill that we have lost if we ever had it in the first place, is dialogue and the ability to have a conversation with someone without running into entrenched positions and without basically just trying to shut them down. We've got to be able to find a way to talk to each other even when we are on completely opposing views, we're being driven into extreme positions by what I believe is a psychological information war, and we've got to start recognizing that is being done to us, and that if we allow ourselves to be driven to the extremes, which we increasingly are, then that is in fact doing the job of the people that are trying to push us in those directions. So we are behaving like sheep. Even the people who think they're wide awake are behaving like sheep in their own way. We've got to recognize that and just stop and think a little bit about what's happening around us.
Quick plug, ukcolumn.org. Please support us by going to the support page. We are independent.
Join us as a member. That is the best way.
Key thing. Yeah. Get over that hurdle. Become
lots of skin in the game. Yeah, UK column.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, I think I may have just misquoted Douglas Murray. I think he said bomb Israel. Of course, I didn't mean that at all. He would never have said that. So my apologies to Douglas.
Yeah.
All right. On that note, gentlemen, Charles Malet, Mike Robertson, thank you for joining me in the weekly Banter trenches.
Thank you very much.